Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, The Innovator's Guide to Cloud Transformation. Today, we will cover the 16 essential strategies that pave the path to cloud transformation, and we will unveil our newest project, a self-service cloud strategy assessment and recommendation engine. We will use this application to demonstrate how to combine smart investment strategy with modern cloud patterns to accelerate your migration efforts without lifting your entire infrastructure. We designed this application to assess your current maturity related to hosting, engineering, sourcing, and practices. As we interact with the application, you will gain a deeper understanding of the levers you can pull to achieve critical business outcomes, such as lower cost and better maintainability, greater uptime, accelerated speed to market, better security, and more. Your presenter is Joe Eplin. Joe is a principal architect here at OCI and leads our cloud engineering practice. And with that, I turn it over to you, Joe.
I'm so glad you could join us today. Very, very interesting topic, and it's a big one. And the idea of the presentation today is to help to navigate to specific things to do, even though this is a really large space, cloud transformation, and there's very many parts to it. The idea today is to use an application we'll put together here at OCI to help you figure out a specific action plan considering where you're at. Okay, we in IT are used to thinking in the space of hosting and engineering, sourcing, practices. We think of those as what needs attention from us as IT leaders. And that's appropriate, and it makes a lot of sense. We are able to solve difficult problems by thinking about things that way. But it happens usually that our leadership, the CEO level folks that we work with, our clients for products that we have, they think differently. They think in terms of cost, availability, is the solution that we are hosting for our constituents, is it future-proof? How secure is it? How fast can we get changes to market? That tends to be the space that our constituents concentrates on. And so the application is designed to bridge the gap between those levers that we can attend to the outcomes that our stakeholders are interested in. The way it was put together is that we used about 20 different projects that we're aware of at OCI, and we characterized them by those different, what was the hosting approach? How was the engineering? Things like that. And we did the math, and we mapped it out into how successful was that in terms of being able to control cost and raise availability, things like that. Okay, so the application, here we go. All right. Shoot, I'm sorry. Okay. So what we're going to do today is actually use that application. All right. So I'm going to switch over here to the Your Next Move application. I think you can see it on your screen now. And notice if you can pop a browser and go to https assessment.objectcomputing.com, I'd encourage you to please go through the application along with me. Okay, so I'll give you a second to get that fired up. I'll go ahead and put my email address in on that first line. Let's call this the webinar, but really just put in whatever name you like typically, and your company name. That's really all we need. What's going to happen is we're going to go through a pretty tidy set of questions, and then at the end of it, we'll have an interactive part of the session where you help us to know what is the interest from a business point of view that you have. And at the end of it, it will mail you the results then. What is the actual recommendation for you personally, all right? So I'm going to get started with the first run through of the application. There's going to be basically 4 screens of just a few questions, much like this one here. So the first area of interest is from the hosting point of view for the work that you do for your constituents. You have to think through how much of your solution is already able to be in a serverless mindset. If you're not quite sure what does that mean, if you click on the entry, it gives you a more of a full textual explanation of what we mean by that. And each topic is like that, each approach to hosting. So what we're looking for is, given these 5 different approaches to hosting, what is your particular approach? So maybe you have a certain amount of, if a department has a budget, then they get what they ask for. Okay, so we would call that on-premises, demand-driven. I'm going to first pass through here. I'm going to try to channel a Fortune 100 kind of company. So they have a certain amount of this. They have a little bit of everything. In fact, there's also some where there's some attention paid to optimizing that on-premises infrastructure. A lot of very large companies have already started to use infrastructure as a service and a cloud hosting approach. Some have started to use Kubernetes and containers in general, and have maybe dabbled a little bit into serverless as well. And you'll notice as I fill in the balance of these different approaches at my company, it's starting to paint a picture down here below in these registers down here. How am I probably doing in terms of controlling costs? How future-proof is what I have? The availability, given this signature from a hosting approach, and based on so far 20 companies' information, we now are starting to have a feel for the current state of maturity of your organization. So please take a second and fill in what the balance is for your company. The next screen is in terms of engineering, how mature is your organization. So you might be the kind of company that is really involved in open source, even contributing to open source when it happens to be particularly close to your value proposition of your company and of your products. So again, there's a range from totally custom to having some reusable components. Maybe these particular ones not succeeding organizationally and then being able to be reusable. Maybe there's a certain amount that you actually have succeeded in having those components be reused. Maybe you're also tapped into some open source. And again, my run through on this, I'm trying to channel a typical Fortune 100 company. They have a little bit of everything. I know it's a little silly to pretend that they're all even like this, but just for the sake of time this morning, I'm touching every one of these and expecting that on a really large company, it probably does have a smattering of these in the company. And notice the registers below have reflected that balance. Now, in the sourcing of my solution, sometimes I can tap into software as a service components. Sometimes it's close to software as a service. It's hosted by a third party in the cloud, but I don't really use the same solution from an ease of rolling out releases as in my particular case might be that it is hosted in the cloud, but it's not really SaaS. Okay, and again, you can kind of see the split of approaches going straight from commercial off-the-shelf stuff that I install on my own servers and I take care of the releases myself and the upgrades and the patches and all that kind of stuff. And again, I'm a really large company, and so I'm just going to pretend for this run through that I just have a little bit of everything. Give you a chance to also fill it out at your desk. And, okay, so I'm using Workday, and I've got some Oracle financials, maybe as COTS, but I've got some SAP where I've used some ABAP code to do some integrations, things like that. My registers here have all been updated now to reflect where I'm at. And there's one more screen to fill out. How reluctant am I to make changes? I got pretty much energy into this working out pretty smoothly. I'm going to put myself in the middle. I'm not terrified. I'm not really comfortable either. I'm aware of APIs, and I have a development staff that taps into those. Some is REST, some is SOAP. Uh, Maybe I'm using some OpenDDS in my case, so I'll go ahead and put that in here too. Um, and I don't yet have catalogs. I don't really even get why I would need to think about catalogs, maybe in my particular Fortune 100 company here. Maybe I'm doing 6 releases a year, let's say. I definitely am not hosting experiments for my solutions when they're web-based, so I'm not going to check that box for this run through. And if I hit next at this point, I'm starting to get a picture of my IT maturity. Towards the middle on my cost control, and I know that. I know it's super expensive for me to have in servers on premises that are paid for by the different departments with no attention to trying to optimize them. So I'm definitely not on the low cost end, but I'm not super high either. I'm starting to do cloud hosting. So kind of towards the middle, just slightly shy of the middle. From future proofness, that combination that we've just selected places me at about 45% of the way across. That seems about right. Availability looks like I'm probably running at about 98% availability. Security, I'm tending towards it being dependent on the developer instead of it really being designed into my solution. And my time to market might be kind of high. Okay, so I'm going to flop back to here for what we're going to distribute as the content. And in this case, for my Fortune 100 example, I've decided that I want to concentrate on innovation and security. Those are the pressing things that my CEO is asking me to pay attention to. So I'm going to crowd up here a little bit. And we said security. So the utility here is telling me that if I concentrated on my CI/CD practices, that would be my lowest cost way of achieving an increase in security. All right, so in other words, if I get better at making it easy to see what's happening inside of my solution and I can change it, I can do retesting, automated testing, things like that, that will really help me improve the security of what I have and move myself towards designed in security instead of dependent on the developer. And then, I'm sorry, what did we say? We're going to also do innovation. Okay, so maybe I want to improve my innovation as well. Okay, and looks like CI/CD, the math underneath it, based on those 20 samples that have fed this, it's really telling me that those two needs that my organization has, they're both pointing to I really need to put attention into going from just using APIs into having catalogs of those APIs and then letting that drive my CI/CD approach. And that'll help me with both my security and my time to market. Okay. What I had in mind now for the rest of the webinar is just a couple more examples. When I hit done here, that's going to send me an email to let me know that the recommendation is for 6 months to concentrate on CI/CD. Now, maybe that unfolded so easily that there's a risk that you've lost sight of the fact that when we went into this exercise, there was 16 of these little arrows, 16 things that you might want to do to improve what you have. Well, I guess, frankly, since we're at IaaS generally optimized, what we would call lift and shift kind of a sourcing mindset and APIs, it's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 things that we might concentrate on. This is saying these two will get me the biggest bang for my buck. All right. So notice at that point, what specifically happens depends a lot on your organization. If you're already using Jenkins and you've got some infrastructure as code kind of stuff already in place, that's going to look a little different than if you're just getting started. And it might have reasons for a particular selection for your automation tooling and your automatic testing and all that kind of stuff. And those are all legitimate and those are all good places to start. But a specific engagement with OCI would be about nailing that down. Exactly where are you? And then that will tell us a specific plan of action so that you can get this done in the next 90 days and you can get to that improvement in security and time to market that you know you need.
So this is an important point for us to pause on, because oftentimes what we see is clients come to us initially thinking, I need an API strategy or I need a hybrid strategy. And what you're showing here is that really you don't start there. You start with the business outcome, which is above on these sliders. And then you make a decision about what the outcome ought to be and what you're trying to achieve as a business. And then looking into all of the available options and prioritizing where to start.
Thank you.
So that's an important point that we're going to continue pressing into for the next couple of examples. As Joe mentioned, no two companies are exactly alike. And the reality is companies come in all sizes and industries. So each need is unique. And what we found in talking to dozens, maybe hundreds of clients and walking through this exercise is some common patterns that have emerged. And so what we're going to get into now is a couple of those patterns and how we've helped recommend an action plan for those companies.
So for example, our second run at this is what about a startup where they don't have a legacy of lots of older technology, and so we're going to run through that tool again, this time with the mindset of a startup. And so just for what it's worth here, we'll go for company startup. All right, and it's OCI, let's say, okay. And in this particular case, since I just got started a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, I'm 100% infrastructure as a service. It's like I don't have time or even money in advance to invest lots of money into on-premises servers and things like that. But I didn't quite exactly understand containerization or serverless, so I got myself a cloud vendor account, and I fired up a bunch of infrastructure as a service servers. Frankly, I was talking to a client about this yesterday evening. This is exactly their picture, is that because of the cost benefits of cloud hosting, they were jumping in 100% on it, but they knew they had lots of servers that weren't really being as efficient as they could, but this was their condition right there. Okay, so it's better than having bought all that machinery themselves. All right, and then let me see, we said for startup company, they are pretty healthy in terms of their engineering. So let's pretend that they are leveraging open source pretty much, but this is a new company, and and it's pretty good attention paid to architecture. So let's just pretend that was 50% reused stuff that was core to them and as part of their value proposition, and 50% leveraging open source. That's a pretty viable combination, okay? From a sourcing of components point of view, we are brand new. We don't got time to be having our own accounting or HR systems or anything like that. We are just 100% SaaS, okay? And let's see how we said here. Oh, yeah. So we are pretty comfortable at releasing software changes. We're using APIs. They're all REST and let's say GraphQL. And we have a catalog of them because we just needed it ourselves. It was just a natural part of what we were doing. And maybe we're doing releases every 2 weeks or so, maybe 24 times a year. We're not up to the point yet of doing experiments, blue-green deployments or anything like that. So with that as our combination, we got a different fingerprint here now of our maturity. Our cost is still kind of in the middle pretty much, we're pretty future proof. All right, this was largely driven by that use of SaaS for our enterprise components. Our availability is kind of rocky. We're kind of detecting that from the combination of the engineering and the hosting decisions that we've made so far. Security is a little better than the previous company, and our time to market is a little better, I think, as well. All right. And since we're a startup, uh, we're getting into the phase where cost is starting to matter to us. So we got our fingerprint here of where we're at. And if I want to squeeze some cost out of this, it looks like I need to move to platform as a service from infrastructure as a service. That'll help me to optimize my use of servers in a really methodical way.
I just want to make sure that the audience saw that change. So as Joe was dragging the circle up there, down below where it says hosting on-premise, intentional, and so at the bottom where it says PaaS, as he scrolls up, it's going to turn green on us. So that's the change that we're looking for when we're talking through these different scenarios. And hopefully you've already gotten that on yours if you're following along.
Thank you. Okay, so that's like another example. And every company's different. So, going through this exercise at the same time is a smart way to go. You can get the picture for your actual company. Okay, so I'm going to say done on that, and it's going to mail me a copy of that report. And it helps me remember, what would be the smart play for the next 90 days. Maybe you need it to bring into your CIO or your CTO or COO or whoever it is, and say, hey, we've been talking to these guys from OCI, and this looks like it would be our next move. I got one more example ready to go today. This time it's just a regional company. It's not a Fortune 100 company or anything like that. So what we're going to do is, let's just call this guy regional. It's just some successful business that has not, had the luxury like a Fortune 100 company of buying everything that came along and having 4 different approaches to reporting and stuff like that. No, this is a company that's been laser focused on succeeding in a regional market. All right. So in this case, that I have most of my stuff is on premises. I've afforded some energy into making sure that I don't have redundant servers or wasted servers, because it matters to me. It's forever. It's mattered to me that I've optimized my use of servers. And I jumped in when it made sense to me a couple years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I started using infrastructure as a service, as a way to not have to buy them on premises. And it's been working out. And I've started to get into containerization, because that also makes sense. It seems kind of complicated, but it's starting to work, just kind of dabbling into containerization from a hosting point of view. All right. Now, in the engineering area, man, open source made sense to me from the very beginning. I've got a lot of open source, and I can't say that I'm perfect about this, but the closest I'd say is about 10% of my product is my own code, my own expression of my value proposition that I've got layered on top of this leveraging open source. You see the fingerprint for the registers down here are starting to reflect a picture for me of how I'm doing in terms of these different value propositions for my stakeholders. Okay. Now, from a sourcing point of view, I've used a lot of SaaS as it's come along. It makes a lot of sense to me. I don't want to have all my own systems when I don't need to. But I also have a certain amount of commercial off-the-shelf stuff, and I'm trying to make the most use of it as I can, like for managing the licensing for my product, things like that, where just a little bit of work extending that, integrating with my commercial off-the-shelf systems has given me a lot of lift. And from a practices point of view, pretty comfortable doing releases. I got a lot of APIs, or some of them are REST, some of them are SOAP. Maybe I'm using some GraphQL. whatever APIs. This one's just interesting note if we do have further conversations later on. And let's say I'm using catalogs. I'm doing about 6 releases a year, and I'm not really able to host experiments yet, though I sure would like to do that. So let's just see how that turned out. So I'm a little bit worse on the cost profile compared to that startup on the previous screen. I'm pretty good on a future-proof point of view. Availability's also at like about 98%. Security's better than average. And in my particular case, maybe I don't care about that too much. And I'm pretty right in the middle in terms of innovation and time to market. So let's have a look at our sheet here. We want to work on our being more future-proof. So if we drag our circle over here, it suggests that I need to be thinking more about software as a service as a paradigm to be adopted from us for sourcing for my particular components that I'm using and what I'm doing internally myself and my company. Okay, and so again, every company's different. Maybe let's do a reset here. Maybe security was my most pressing thing. It seems a little counterintuitive, but the numbers show it that CI/CD is pretty solid in terms of helping me to improve the security of what I have. It allows me to capture the areas of my solution that need ongoing attention, so I don't slide into an insecure hosting. And so CI/CD, as turns out, is probably the low-cost way to make improvements on the security of my solutions. So I think I'll just leave it with that one and say done, and let that mail me those results. Okay. So what do you think?
At this time, we would like to invite our audience members to drop us a chat in that chat box. And we'd love to hear what your results were if you were following along with us, and we'd love to answer any questions for you.
Thanks.
Okay, we have our first question, and that is, it's kind of more of a comment, and that is, it seems like a lot of the results returned CI/CD. Why is that?
Well, I guess there's 2 answers to that. One is just thinking about the domain, but I'd like to start with the answer being it's totally driven by the numbers, by the 20 companies that we knew the information about and that we pulled together into the matrix that's underneath this tool. So it's not like we have our thumb on the scale or anything like that. It's based on the numbers. That being said, I think that it is consistent with kind of the industry trend towards CI/CD, that it's sort of a natural benefit that affects a lot of these ambitions that a company might have in terms of what they want to improve. That CI/CD affects multiple requirements in a very healthy, virtuous way. So I think that's basically the answer. But we've talked about, in fact, gathering your perception about what's happening here by letting you actually drag the vertical lines. We're thinking about having the next release of this product, let you drag the lines to reflect what you actually think about your organization, and that will also help us to be capturing data. We can apply machine learning to this app ourselves, and we plan on doing that.
The next question is related to, and I'm going to summarize the question, so I hope that's okay. If you cannot affect certain aspects of these areas, so for example, with hosting, in certain cases, companies are unwilling to modify their hosting strategies. So what do you do then?
Yeah, so I guess the thing to start with is that as you're filling out the application, when you get to this screen here where you're dragging the circles, it's going to tell you, because we know from experience and from the numbers that, for example, putting attention into your hosting might be a smart play. Or in this case, it was SaaS. Let me see if I can go up to one. Oh, let's say getting from infrastructure as a service to platform as a service. Okay, maybe you can't do that. Maybe you have a reason not to do that. What you can do then is just actually drag your circles, for let's say your secondary or your third level uh, requirement that you'd like to see, in terms of improvement, and then that will tell you other options. Uh, we have in mind an improvement to let you pin one of those uh, levers when you know that in your own case you can't make a change to it. And but until we implement that in the tool, I propose you can probably get the benefit that you want out of it by just further dragging other circles to reflect what your requirements are. That makes sense?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. So I haven't seen any more questions come through. So last call for questions. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, and we will send everyone a link to the recording of what we covered here today, as well as a link to the tool and some additional information on how you can get started with your cloud transformation. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks a lot.